Republicans have 2 years to turn it around, or the pendulum could swing back. But how can they do that when it's not only the public that is afraid of the economy, but big businesses themselves are reluctant to expand and to hire more people? How can we encourage big businesses to, again, try and stimulate the economy by hiring more?
Well, two things. One, I want to make sure that I defer to both the gentlemen here on that also, because I think Ohio, and knowing specifically about Ohio, is a perfect test case for what you need to do or what should be done to eventually pull people, pull a nation, pull a region out of debt, and what works and what doesn't work. So I'll say this quickly, and then I want them both to sort of look at maybe some regional examples that they know of. Look, the fact of the matter is right now, we still have companies that are making record profits. There's tons of people who are making money. They just don't want to share it with anybody. Right? They don't want to hire anybody. Because guess what businesses found out? They found out that, oh my gosh, the economy was going bad in 2007 when we were told it was going bad. And I used to have 150 employees, right? So I fired 50 of them. I had to let them go. I didn't want to. I didn't, okay? I liked being a member of the community and being a business leader and being a pillar of the community. I liked having it, but I had to let 50 of them go because I was scared. And usually layoffs and things like that happen before you have too much profit loss. You're laying people off in anticipation of profits that you don't think you're going to get. So what happens? I lay off the 50 people, I save some money, I keep my company from going under. Now I'm making a little more money. Maybe things have improved a bit. But guess what? I can get these 100 people working scared to do just as much as the 150 I used to hire. So if I can get 100 people to do what 150 people used to do, and I get to keep the extra profits, I'm not hiring anybody. And when you have scared employees, you get a lot more work out of scared employees. Okay? High school recitals don't get attended. Church meetings don't get attended. Baseball leagues don't get coaches because mothers and fathers are scared to death of taking any time off to do regular people stuff because they're afraid of losing their jobs. Now, the way you fix that from a federal standpoint, you need to do something to further incentivize companies to actually hire. You need to eliminate the loopholes for sending jobs overseas. I've discussed it. We have a show called Outsource. Not because it's insulting and it's racist and it's garbage that comes on NBC. You guys have probably heard of this show. It's like about the guy who goes overseas and works at, it's not just because of those things, which make me nauseous, but also because it represents the normalization of something that actually is leading to the absolute destruction of the working and middle class in this country. You know, I tell this story a couple of years ago. When I was actually in graduate school in North Carolina, and my cable was out, which happens all the time. And so I call the cable company because they never do their jobs. And I'm calling them up, and I'm like, "Oh, how's the weather?" I asked the question, and the person's like, "Oh, the weather is raining here." And I'm like, "It's bright outside. There's birds chirping and everything." I was like, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm not really supposed to." "Where are you?" "They were in Canada." Canada. You're trying to tell me that, like, my cable company, which is 5 miles down the street from my house in North Carolina, that you couldn't find somebody here in this country, in North Carolina, to do that job? But no, Time Warner Cable is employing somebody in Saskatchewan, right? And they're getting away with it because we make it easy for them. You want to get people to hire? Incentivize companies to hire. You want to get people to invest? You incentivize these companies to invest. You want to get entrepreneurs started again? Get all these darn banks that we gave the huge bailout to start opening up the spigot again. They paid us back, and they're still not sharing the money. You've got tons. I mean, the recessions are actually when some of the most brilliant business innovators in America come from. Like Jim Henson's Muppets came out of recession. I mean, people come up with brilliant ideas in recessions because they've lost their jobs, and they can't get loans. So, I think that's how you improve the economy. We need to open up the spigot again, and Ohio-specific things, I think other panelists could probably address.
Work our way down.
Sure. Wow. Yeah, there are companies that are making money right now. There's no question about it. They're holding on to the money. They're not expanding. And the reason for that is the uncertainty of government. When a business is shopping around for an expansion or a new place to locate, to build a plant or start another operation, one of the things, the very first thing they look at is government, local government. Is local government working? Does it work? Meaning, the trash picked up? Do we have community involvement? Do we have good streets and lighting? I mean, what's going on in the community. It's one of the things they look at. It means the government's working. They want to be a part. Everybody wants to be a part of something that's good, that's something that's working, something that's winning. And with the uncertainty of the last few years of where our government is going, what is our national policy, the people that create the jobs by investing their money, that's not the government's money they're investing, that these businesses have made, it's people's money. They're putting money and their livelihoods at risk. I was a business owner. I had people, and I got to tell you, there comes a day in the week when you got to decide, do you pay the people or do you go home and eat the macaroni and cheese tonight? That's the way it works. You take care of the people. So, you look at this, and if government's not working and there's an uncertainty of what direction we're going, the people that have their money at risk will not invest it. And so the government has to look at, the government doesn't make jobs. The government has to provide an environment of certainty, an environment of comfort for these investors to invest the money, which creates the jobs. There's some thought of, why don't we have take more of a European model, higher taxes on businesses. Why do we want to be like Europe? Why don't we be like America, where you have the opportunity to make the American dream, to become whatever you want to be. And so we look at this as, where are we going? The uncertainty right now is such that they've put new people in office in hopes of getting vision of what this certainty is going to be for the next couple of years, and it's going to lead to the 2012.
There's something in your question that I wanted to address. I think you were saying, like, can the Republicans turn it around? Will it be fair if they can't get these jobs given all these other problems? And, I mean, in this election in particular, the Republicans deserve to wear the jacket. They ran on the two largest campaigns in Ohio, the U.S. Senate and the governor's, on one number, more ubiquitous than your zip code, and that is 400,000 jobs lost. They ran an election that was framed solely that every single job lost in Ohio between, January 1st of 07 through now was the governor's fault. That burden now carries over to them, and that's what's going to be fascinating to see. Now, realistically, as I know the Plain Dealer and many other organizations pointed out, we lost and we're losing jobs dramatically under the previous 16 years of Republican rule. And, even though we'd make the argument and sort of look at the economics and the larger cycle, the Republicans, U.S. Senator Rob Portman's campaign, we joked earlier, he campaigned entirely as if he was Sherrod Brown, in the factory fighting for the middle class. In jeans, never wore anything but, never talked about any of the larger politics. He talked about jobs, 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 jobs. John Kasich's entire campaign, very effectively, wouldn't go off message and talked about 400,000 jobs lost. It was his fault. They now wear that jacket. So they've doomed themselves because economic cycles can't be turned around. Within those arguments, they do try to talk about things that can spur businesses. I mean, there's a little bit, I see a little bit of both arguments here of what's going on, business regulation. We hear a lot about it. Yes, they want certainty. That's been happening. Taxes in Ohio for businesses have been going down since 2005 when the Republican Bob Taft in the legislature supported a dramatic change in how we even tax corporations. That's made a huge difference in attracting businesses. This comes not from me, but from tax experts, former tax commissioners that now consult for companies. And Ohio's biggest problem is high personal income tax, but a lot of that is driven by what happens in your local community. They can't deal with it on the state level necessarily. So that aspect I think that the Republicans are going to fail because they have framed this as, every job lost is the guy in office's fault. And I think that's going to be a real tough hurdle to come around, given that the truth about economic cycles in businesses and investments doesn't happen overnight.
Thank you. I'm Mary Ostendorf. I'm a Stonewall Democrat, and I came from Cleveland trying to learn and still wanting to make things better in the world. The judiciaries really concern me as I get older. Until these last couple of elections, when I could do my ballot at home, I really wasn't always sure, although I always voted. I wasn't always sure about the judiciary. And this year in Cuyahoga County, we had someone run who fortunately lost. But then the newspaper, one of the editors in one of our local papers said that people who voted for her should have been ashamed. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe what's happening here is that the media hasn't been informing us well enough. And then I jump from the county to our Supreme Court in the United States, where I imagine they have children, and we tell children, when you have rights, honey, you have responsibilities, and they come together. And yet we have a Supreme Court who has told these corporations that you have rights and you don't have responsibilities. And I'm concerned about that, and I don't know, I would think maybe that our hope would be to get people in to vote who haven't been, but then I also think we've got to deal with people who are reading newspapers and magazines or coming to meetings like this, and I just wonder what you all who are professionals, I'm a retired nurse, what you all think about this. The judiciary does really concern me.
Again, we could spend a couple hours on this, but since you raised the issue of the media's role, I'll start if you guys don't mind. Certainly, we don't write enough about the national judiciary. I mean, you have to go inside the A section of the Plain Dealer to get it. We write a good amount on the local stuff. Our editorials pages take the role of trying to talk about the judges. I think she's referring to a Cuyahoga County Judge, Bridget McCafferty, who was indicted earlier this year. And her name appeared on the ballot. She can't actually practice right now until her case is solved. We pay her. She's on the ballot. The Plain Dealer ran a pretty aggressive editorial campaign to tell people don't vote for her. She wasn't a highly rated judge beforehand, but she still garnered more votes than if she was in several other races. I mean, she had more votes than the other Democrats who won. She just happened to lose in this case because of a very strong reminder that the paper was pushing that this is the indicted judge. I think we need to do more to promote the Judge for Yourself, which is one of the organizations that really takes a look at the voting record and does the work of what maybe years ago newspapers did and tries to rank the judges, their quality on the bench. You know, obviously it's the name game and all those other things on the local level that matter. Irish surnames are pretty powerful in Cuyahoga County. Again, we don't cover individually. We have a Washington bureau. We don't write much about the Supreme Court nominees. We carry the wire stories on it. That's just a fact of limited space. What we can offer you that you can't get on the web from the New York Times or somewhere else is local news. That's why we're focused on it.
Two parts, well, three parts. Voting for judges or appointment. You know, federal judges typically come from local judges. And from a campaign aspect, typical judicial races, because it's a cost factor, and there's things that the newspapers try to do, there's no question about it, try to get information out about judges. But typically, these local judicial races end up being can just turn into a name identification race. We'll go to the federal side of things. Federal judges are appointed, they're presidential appointments, and typically the pool that these judges come from are our local judiciary, the ones that we have put in the judiciary at a local level. And I think it's important that you have the ability to vote for judges. You got to be able to have a referendum on somebody as a branch of our government. And America is very unique in its judiciary, in that it is an independent branch of our government. In other countries, the judiciary is an arm or an extension of the administration, carrying the line, message, policy, direction of the administration. There's only one way they can go. It's not an interpretation of the law. It's how the administration wants the law to be interpreted. Our judges, because they are independent, have the ability to be able to look at the law and adjudicate. I'm a strict constructionist when it comes to the judiciary. I believe it should be, the judges need to look at the law and interpret the law very strictly. I don't believe that it's a position for judges to legislate from the bench. And it's been a great discussion for years with editorial boards about judges. It's interesting, Chief Justice Moyer passed away. He and I have had these discussions, and he was absolutely for we should have an appointment process, and I'm against an appointment process. I believe they should be elected. There's a hybrid out there that, okay, we appoint them, and then the people vote to see if they should stay in office for an initial 10 years or so. West Virginia Supreme Court, the terms of the Supreme Court in West Virginia is 12 years. Here it's in Ohio, it's 4 years. So I think that not legislating from the bench, having the judiciary autonomous and keeping it autonomous so that and the appointment process doesn't lead it to be autonomous anymore, because now you have people vying their careers, their legal careers, in hopes of getting a judicial appointment. They may focus it to that. And then it becomes, who is the appointees? There's no such thing as nonpartisan groups. The boards of elections aren't nonpartisan. They're bipartisans, Republicans and Democrats, working together to make it work. On the judiciary, if you have it set up so it's an appointment process, who is that group? Who is that interest group that's going to be making those appointments? Is it the executive office, and then the judiciary becomes a branch of the executive office? Or is it a bipartisan group that, and how do you break a tie if you have 6 Republicans and 6 Democrats? I mean, how's it work? So the judiciary, I'm very passionate about the judiciary. I very strongly believe the independence of the judiciary and its ability to interpret the law as it's legislated is very important for our democracy to continue, because our legislature is the voice of the people, and the judiciary interprets that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. First, I'll talk about local, and then sort of national and federal. What I mentioned before about information is key. I mean, if I'm voting for my state senator or my state house person, I can get a pretty good idea as to what he or she has done. All right, they're going to fix schools, they're going to do this, they've done a good job, they own a local dry cleaning shop or something else like that. But the thing about judges is, I mean, most people don't understand the law. So it's actually really hard to vote for judges. And if you're in a situation where they have to run in the nonpartisan races, or it's not really clear, yeah, I mean voting for judges is extremely problematic because of the information required. I mean, to be perfectly honest with you, what's a good judge if you don't know the law? Is it the judge who comes up with decisions that make you happy? Not necessarily. If I'm on the way to vote in the morning and I get pulled over, I may be in a really surly mood about whoever the incumbent is, because I'm going to be in front of him or her in the next 6 or 7 weeks. But that doesn't necessarily determine whether or not the judge is doing a good job. So I think information, I was talking about before about the informed voter, I have serious concerns about voting for judges, because most people don't know enough about the legal system or what the responsibilities of these men and women are to make informed decisions. And I believe, as I do with most elected officials and most people running for office and most people in the judiciary, they're sincerely trying to do the best job they can. I think most of those people, they're trying to do a good job. I don't think you've got many judges out there, I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat, most people running for office, they think they're trying to do the right thing. Now, when you get to the federal level, kind of a different situation. You get to the Supreme Court, yeah, I'm vehemently against some of the extremely corporatist decisions that they've come up with over the last 10 to 15 years. And that's not just Bush, that's Clinton, and that's Obama. And they're all pretty much, have been appointing people who are going to perpetuate this. In the real world, if I broke into your house and stole an apple pie, and then you caught me and said, I got you red-handed, Jason, you have my apple pie. The way that the Supreme Court has been handing down rulings for corporations, what I would say is like, whoa, that's terrible. Good thing you caught Jason Inc. Because Jason didn't steal your pie, it was Jason Inc. And once we can find out who's actually running Jason Inc., we will make sure that they pay the consequences. Now, as you're trying to find Jason Inc., it disbands. And so you're never going to figure out who took your pie. I'll just hold it until Jason Inc. comes back and resolves itself. And unfortunately, that's how the Supreme Court has said that corporations can operate. They can do all sorts of lousy stuff. They're treated as people when they want to give money to campaigns and defend themselves for lawsuits. But if it gets really bad, they can magically disappear or dissolve themselves or sell themselves to someone else, and then no one has to pay any consequences. And I have a real problem with that. I think it destroys small business. Small business person couldn't get away with that, but a huge multinational corporation can. So on the local level, we need to do something about the information level of voters. On a federal level, I have problems with some of the people who have been appointed to the court over the last 10 or 15 years because I think ultimately what they're doing is antithetical to a capitalist nation that thrives on small businesses. And I think they make decisions that harm small business.
Hello. I'd like to talk about immigration. Currently leading up to the election, there was a big push in Arizona for this new immigration law. At first, it kind of seemed standoffish. Not everyone was sure if they wanted to agree with it or disagree with it. But as the election grew and after the election, it seems like it might not have been so crazy now that the Republicans are in office. So I was curious what your repercussions of immigration will be with this new system of Republicans.
Well, I know my position, and I think back when I was in grade school, it's one of the things you were taught is what's on the Statue of Liberty. Give us your tired, your poor. I support immigration. I think that's what our nation's built on. But I think there's it's important that the immigration laws are enforced, and I don't think they're being enforced strongly, and or strong enough. And I think that it's not fair for so many that have waited in line to suddenly be granted a citizenship role just because they're here, when others have gone through the methodology to become a United States citizen. And I think some more time needs to be put into how do we secure our borders? What is a country without secure borders? It's not a country. It's very, very difficult. America was built with immigration, and I'm a big supporter of immigration.
I don't see it as an issue that's going to be dealt with because, again, the economy, jobs, that was framed. It's certainly a wedge issue in places like Arizona. It's not an issue in Ohio. We have a Southern Ohio legislator that's still talking about it, but it's going to go nowhere. Ohio doesn't have an immigration problem, but you won't see it. You haven't heard it yet coming up. It's all been about whether we're dealing with the health care, what we're going to do with future stimulus, what we're going to do with the national debt, what we're going to do with the tax, extend tax cuts or not. Immigration is just politically, again, it works in elections. It's a wedge issue, but it's not going to come up in 2011, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's not,
Right.
it matters. It matters in the particular states that you're in. And one thing I want to say, I think all too often on the left or the right, the actual financial and sort of sovereignty implications of immigration are seldom discussed. You have some right-wing people who just hate Mexicans, because when we talk about immigration, that's what we're talking about. No one's getting mad about all the Chinese people or all the Russian people that sneak in here, right? Nobody's screaming about all the people who sneak in through Canada. They're talking about Mexicans, right? And the truth of the matter is, when we talk about Mexico and illegal immigration from Mexico, there's very seldom, like I said, a real discussion. For example, on the one hand, you have a classic example. I have family who live down in the area who are public school teachers, and you hear stories all the time of you send 20 kids out for recess and 27 come back in. Because illegal immigrants stand by the fences, they know they can't register their kids legally, and they say, hey, go, 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 go. So, you know, you have this 7-year-old who doesn't speak English who comes in after recess is over. You're going to send the kid out on the street? No. You feed him and put him in a class somewhere, and then you're stuck, right? What are you going to do? The kid's 7. But, you know, it becomes this sort of resource issue. Then you have, for example, what you have happening in North Carolina, a lot of states that have heavy farming and industry, poultry industry, et cetera, et cetera. There was a Senate bill that was passed in the late 90s under the Clinton administration, which basically provides an immigration caveat where if you are in agriculture, you can submit a form to the Department of Agriculture and to Department of Business, I can't remember which one it is, Commerce Department, and say, I can't find enough indigenous Americans to bring in my crops. Please give me immigration vouchers. And so you have farmers who get immigration vouchers, and they send big vans and trucks and trains and things down to Mexico, get immigrants to come here and bring in the crops, but guess what? They are not legally obligated to make sure those people go home. So they bring people here every fall or in the summer to harvest things, and then they're just here, right? And then you have the issue, and this is an equally critical one, which is seldom discussed, which is, one, illegal immigrants, for example, in California, they put more into the economy than they take out because they're working and they're buying stuff, et cetera, et cetera. 40%. This is horrifying to think about, but this is why Mexico's a second world country. 40% of sort of the personal income GDP in Mexico comes from remissions from people outside of the country sending money back. Okay? If we didn't let all those people come here, that country goes broke and it's taken over by the drug dealers, which is pretty much what they're dealing with now. Which is one of the reasons why their drug war is so bad, because after 2001, we actually got slightly tougher on immigration. They couldn't sneak drugs into this country as much as they used to, and there's been a 20% increase in drug use within the Mexican population since 2001. So now they're all fighting over the same territory. If we block off those borders right now and say nobody can get in here, that country is going to go to hell in a handbasket in about 5 years, and then we're really going to be in trouble. So, no one wants to talk about that. Everyone wants to say Mexicans are taking jobs, or they want to say, oh, you're a racist because you say Mexicans are taking jobs. But until we have a real comprehensive discussion as to what the financial and political consequences are of having people running back and forth against our borders every single day, we're not going to get anything done. And that's the unfortunate thing. We're not going to get anything done, and we need to. Because it's only going to take one person to sneak over that border and blow up a building one day, and then we're really going to be scared. That's not going to happen. So.
All right. Actually, I have a question as well. Real simple. So all we've heard was swing pendulum, blah, 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 mandate from the people. This is related to the Ohio governor's race. Simply put, why was it so close?
Everybody heard that. I think because you had obviously you had a lot on the side of the Republican, the economy, all of that stuff going on. Both campaigns had literally unlimited funds, both directly. They set a record, by the way, of raising and spending more than $33 million between the two major candidates. It was close because you had the job loss issue on the Republican side, and really, and this is why it was so close, and you know, it would have been a greater upset had Kasich lost, because again, everything was on his side. He had the unique stature of having that Wall Street stigma. And the governor, who ran a fairly passive campaign in 2006, came out on the day of the primary and started running ads about you can't trust him because he's from Wall Street. That message took time, it took hold, and you saw it, about 100,000 votes separated them. I mean, that's my opinion of boiled down the Wall Street issue versus the economy, and the economy issue, again, reflecting the national mood, I think won out, but that kept that race very close, and the money was fairly equal. The Democrats probably had a slight edge overall, but we don't know from all the independent groups that accounting isn't all in. We don't know what the campaigns, but neither side complained about lack of money.
I can't disagree. I mean, it was races in Ohio are big races, or more descriptively competitive races in Ohio are typically pretty close races. They just are.
You know, I remember the day of the primary. I think we were actually on a show together talking about that right after the primaries. And I remember, you know, right after, you know, Kasich was made the Republican nominee, that, you know, Strickland came out with the attack campaign, and Lehman Brothers and all these things. I remember thinking at the time, I was like, oh, wow, Strickland's going to lose. Because, look, if you're the incumbent and you start attacking, you're losing. That means your internal polls say, if we don't define this guy quickly, just on the merits of what's going on in the political environment right now, we've got no chance. And so, yeah, every single thing was working in Kasich's favor. It still ended up being a close race. I think it's you know, one, that he had the sort of Wall Street connections, and two, and this was my understanding from some of the polls I saw, a lot of people, they liked Ted Strickland. I mean, he was a likable guy. It's one thing when you think someone's done a bad job and you think they're insensitive or they're not a nice person, but most people had a positive view of him personally. But they had a hard time not blaming him for 400,000 jobs being lost. So, you know, that sort of conflict of, he's a decent guy, should I give him another chance? But man, 400,000 jobs, that's a lot. That played a big role.
Well, thank you